Welcome to the Cedar Park United podcast, Sundays in the Solarium. Our Trinity Sunday worship was an invitation to wonder at the mystery of God as love in relationship. Through music and scripture, we listened, sang, and shared in a service shaped by the worship life of those who live at St. Andrew's residence, as they experience it each Sunday afternoon with our pastoral minister, Jessica Gauthier. Listen as she shares what Sundays in the Solarium are like and adds context to her role of walking alongside the Cedar Park United community through this season of transition.
I was talking with this person a few weeks ago, and when I began describing the other ministry that I do not at Cedar Park, he encouraged me to share it with this community. And I thought about it, and I realized that probably the best way to do that would be to show you. Today is a bit of a liturgical anniversary. So a year ago liturgically, not in June 2024, on May 26th, 2024, when it was Trinity Sunday, that was my first time here at Cedar Park, offering pulpit supply. And at first, at that time, it seemed likely that I would just be visiting occasionally, offering pulpit supply now and then, maybe coming as a musician. But between then and now, I have somehow been grafted into this community. Now, those who know something about Rabbi Friedman and family systems theory know that being grafted into this community means we all have challenges ahead of us. And so much has changed this year. So, one thing that changed, not for you, for me, is I began working in palliative care at Mount Sinai Hospital. So palliative care at Mount Sinai, every palliative care home is different. At Mount Sinai, it is for people with a life expectancy of 3 months or less who have specific needs and don't have other specific needs, so that the resources that Mount Sinai has can serve them well, and so that there won't be unnecessary suffering for people who have needs that can't be met. And at Mount Sinai, I do some spiritual care that is more formal and uses my training, but I also give foot rubs and shoulder rubs and sing songs, old hymns and lullabies, and read from the King James red letter Bible by the side of somebody's bed. There's lots of things that are done that don't need a professional. They just need someone who cares. And I also began leading worship and leading the spiritual care at St. Andrew's residence, CHSLD St. Andrew. It's a long-term care home. It was founded by the Presbyterian Church, and a few decades ago, it became a government institution. I offer spiritual care and lead worship every Sunday because at St. Andrew's there is a psychosocial, spiritual, and religious identity that is maintained, just as in, let's say, Jewish elder care. And St. Andrew's has a Presbyterian, Scotch Presbyterianism actually as its roots, and so some of that is upheld. But my responsibility for spiritual care is to all of the residents who live there, most of whom are not Presbyterian. So, here at Cedar Park also, much has changed. Revi has retired. You are discerning your future. And I have come to walk with you for a season. There's often some confusion about what I do. At Mount Sinai, I was recently called the spiritual lady. But there's confusion everywhere, especially since most of my work here at Cedar Park happens during the week. So when I'm not preparing a worship service, I'm answering emails and I'm updating paperwork and navigating policies and politics and organizing pastoral logistics and working and being supported very strongly by my teammates, Amy and Martha, and always trying to help us hold together that sacred tension between what we profess and how we live it out. Like practice what you preach or walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So this placement, this appointment by the region of Jessica Gauthier here, where I am called a pastoral minister because that seemed to everyone like the best way to describe it. This is what the United Church calls an SME. In the olden days, they had 1 year like this or 2 years that were all part of the same experience, and it was part of your training. So that is something that I had a few years ago. That's called an IMY, IMI, in ministry year. But the SME, I hate acronyms with a flaming passion. It means that I'm in paid accountable ministry at Cedar Park, and that while I'm here, I have specific learning goals about how to be a faith leader in a time of transition. I'm held accountable to that learning by my regional supervisor, Rosemary, and by my community of faith connection, which is what we used to call a lay support committee. Paul leads the committee, and he's supported by Wendy, Joanne, and Richard. And so what I'm doing here is learning how to empower others while staying rooted in word, sacrament, and pastoral care, which is the foundation of ordained ministry. But I think at this point I have to pause, because there's that phrase, pastoral care. And it might sound like something reserved for clergy, and we could talk for another whole day about what clergy means and what minister means and all of that, but we're not going to do that here. It might sound like something abstract or maybe a little fluffy, but what I have come to understand, especially recently through my work at St. Andrew's, is that pastoral care is deeply practical, deeply relational, and deeply shared. And so I want to take you there for a moment. St. Andrew's is a government-run long-term care home with 70 residents, 35 on each floor. On Sunday afternoons, about 20 of them, 20 of the 70, most living with serious neurocognitive challenges, make their way down the halls with walkers and wheelchairs, and often with the help of a volunteer or a PAB, to gather in the Solarium. And I call that procession in and out of the Solarium the gospel train. Can't help it. Our service looks a little different. There's no sermon. Instead, we move through the liturgy with hymns from all different Christian traditions, songs that echo the scripture and the prayers and the movements of worship. Everything is printed in large text and fully written out, including how to say the reading from the book of and the verses in the chapters, because that's very confusing for some of the residents who still love to read out loud, and I want to support that so that there's no shame, but there's confidence instead. Each page says when to turn the page, because sometimes a person might still be able to turn the page and still be able to read, but not be able to take that step of turning the page on their own. So sometimes it helps to have a little message saying turn the page. And if that doesn't always work, then the volunteers help find people their place. I usually stop at the bottom of every page and say, now it's time to turn the page. And then I usually stop in between every section and say, we are now on the middle of page blah, blah, blah. So at St. Andrew's, it's the volunteers who embody the ministry of the whole community in the most tender and practical ways. They're the ones helping residents find their place in the bulletin, and they're the ones who are making the hymns are taped so that the staples won't scratch fragile skin. And they're the ones transporting wheelchairs and passing out pages and reminding someone when it's time to do the reading that they agreed to do, or escorting someone from a different floor who might really want to come, but they were reminded 10 minutes ago that there is a service, and now they've forgotten, and it would be terrible for them to miss it. And so those volunteers are the ones who go and hold that person by the hand and bring them to the service and bring them back. They're the ones who just hold hands, make eye contact. They're the ones who sing softly when a resident forgets the words, or they might call out the words at the beginning. They're the ones who comforts a resident when that resident begins to weep. We don't know why, but I can tell you in my other role, which is more confessional and confidential, that people have reasons to weep at every age and in every condition. And so the word is alive at St. Andrew's, not always in words themselves, but in music, in gesture, in presence. For people who can follow the theological and spiritual words, the hymns are chosen with great care. And for people who are mostly touched by the music that they are familiar with, the melodies are chosen with great care. Sometimes I will sing a solo. Sometimes we sing Cyndi Lauper or John Denver. There's a lot of people who come because they like the music and they like being in community. And they might not be Christian. They might actually be a totally different religion, or they might be very comfortable telling everyone they're an atheist, although probably less so at St. Andrew's because it's dominated by a generation who expects everyone to go to church. And then there are staff. Those are my colleagues. They're nurses, PABs, recreation aides, and coordinators. And each one of them has specialized training and deep practical wisdom. I'm used to working part-time as one voice among many with 20 bosses and no bosses. I rely on the expertise of my colleagues and volunteers in areas that I don't have any, just as they sometimes will turn to me for insight on spirituality or culture or religion or triaging spiritual distress. So we learn from each other. We care together. My title in the public system is Spiritual Care Professional. And some people find that term quite strange. It's a bit of a compromise term. They might think I'm going to try and convert them, or that spiritual means something vague or mystical. But whether it's pneuma or ruach or spirare, spirituality has to do with the thing that gives us breath and makes us want to keep breathing. It's helping people discover what it is that gives their life meaning, how to stay connected to what matters, how to find their own answers and their own inner resilience. Not magic and not fixing anyone. It's really about listening, observing, accompanying, and also asking questions that might be uncomfortable for most people to ask. Asking questions that some people may just be beginning to ask themselves or have not realized that they are asking themselves. So I don't do it perfectly, and even with training and even more training someday, I never will do it perfectly. I do bring some skills. I bring musical and theological and clinical skills. But the real work of ministry belongs to the whole community. The people who come on Sunday afternoons to Sunday in the Solarium, they're coming to church. They say as much. That is their church home. And what our tradition once called the priesthood of all believers, that's kind of what's going on in a community of faith. So I'm not the only one who's caring for people spiritually. I might be a kind of specialist, although there are many who are far more specialized than I am. But much of spiritual or pastoral care is simply the gift of a loving, non-judgmental, non-anxious presence. Pastoral ministry is about being entrusted to help keep the church accountable to its mission, and to do that alongside others. So music and ministry and the Spirit, they flow through all of us, and they are what a theologian might call the song between us. That's what we're doing today. Or as Augustine would have called it when he described the Trinity, maybe the lover and the beloved and the love that flows between them.